This is the Capitol Rundown.
To stop the progressive far-left agenda that the governor has been ushering through the state of Michigan.
I think there was a fear that was, that was elevated through these ads about some of these social issues that don't necessarily reflect the reality of what's going on.
And I will do everything in my power to be the principled leader that you deserve.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Siobhan Klepfer. The transfer of power process has begun as President-elect Donald Trump prepares to move back into the White House. Tuesday's election bigs bring changes on the national level, giving the Republican Party more control over the country, and the political landscape in Michigan is also going to be different. Perhaps the biggest change will be Republicans taking control of the State House of Representatives. We'll have more on that a little bit later. As for Michigan's congressional races, they were some of the most watched in the country. Republican Tom Barrett was able to flip Michigan's 7th congressional district, defeating Democrat Curtis Hertel with just over 50% of the vote. The district makes up much of mid-Michigan and is currently represented by Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin, who went on to win a seat in the U.S. Senate on Tuesday. Republican Tim Walberg kept his seat in the 5th congressional district, defeating Democratic challenger Libby Urban with almost 66% of the vote. Congressman Walberg is a longtime representative for the state, now in his 8th term on Capitol Hill. In Michigan's 3rd district, which centers around the city of Grand Rapids, Democrat Hillary Scholten held her seat with about 54% of the vote against Republican challenger Paul Hudson. Well, as we said, Congresswoman Slotkin is now Senator-elect Slotkin. While Republicans won enough seats to take control of the U.S. Senate, she was able to keep the seat blue as Senator Debbie Stabenow retires. Here's the Rundown's Rachel Ramsey with more.
I want to thank my fellow Michiganders for being engaged citizens, for caring about what happens in your state and your country. And I will do everything in my power to be the principled leader that you deserve.
Elissa Slotkin took office as a member of the House in 2019. Now, Michigan has elected her to represent the state as a U.S. Senator, working alongside Democratic Senator Gary Peters. But she says she'll work for all Michiganders, regardless of party.
I will continue to show up, to listen, to show up again. When you call upon me, I will answer that call and I will act.
Before getting elected to Congress, Slotkin worked for the CIA under President Obama and Bush, but she says her priorities as a senator are focused around the dinner table.
My primary job will be to work every day to expand the middle class by creating jobs with dignity, attacking the costs that are eating the biggest bites out of people's budgets, and creating a tax policy that lets Michiganders keep more of what they earn.
Slotkin beat Republican and former Congressman Mike Rogers. He released a statement congratulating Slotkin on her victory, along with saying, quote, "I am humbled and honored for the millions of Michiganders who embraced our campaign, shared their thoughts, their concerns, their ideas, and put their faith and trust in me to serve our great state as U.S. Senator." Rogers also says he has no doubt Donald Trump will help move America forward. Slotkin also addressed the presidential election, saying the results were not what she hoped, but
Donald Trump and I were both elected by the people of Michigan, and it is my responsibility to get things done for Michiganders, no matter who's in office, just as I did in President Trump's first term.
I'm Rachel Ramsey with your Capitol Rundown.
Well, coming up later on the Capitol Rundown, we will dive into the presidential race as it played out here in Michigan. But first, we're going to take a look at the changes coming to the Michigan House of Representatives. The Capitol Rundown will be right back. Welcome back. Tuesday's election delivered control of the state house to Republicans. Democrats held both chambers and the governor's office after the 2022 midterms for the first time in 40 years with a slim 56 to 54 seat majority. In the next term, it will be 58 to 52 in favor of the GOP. On Thursday, Republican State Representative Matt Hall announced he would serve as the next Speaker of the State House. He has led the minority Republican caucus for 2 years. In his announcement, he said his party would work to make Michigan the best place to raise a family safely and affordable. Other Republicans are looking at it as a chance to move the state closer to their conservative ideal.
It gives us the opportunity to stop the progressive far-left agenda that the governor has been ushering through the state of Michigan that's really impacted the economy here and really impacted the bottom lines for everyday Michiganders.
But Democrats still have plans on how to spend the time left before the transition of power and even after.
I was fortunate to forge some good relationships with Republicans when I was in the minority my very first term, but I anticipate a fast and furious lame duck from now until December.
Well, once Republicans are back in power, bipartisanship is not a sure thing. Professor Matt Grossman of Michigan State University's Institute for Public Policy and Social Research has this to say.
Now there'll be a much more serious roadblock for anything that the Democrats want to get through, and the Republicans will be able to expand the agenda to their side, but that doesn't mean they'll ever be able to actually overturn Democratic policies.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at the presidential election results and how Michigan played a role. That and much more still to come. President Joe Biden and his administration committed to working with President-elect Donald Trump on his return to the White House. Our Washington correspondent Jesse Tenor reports.
That's what the American people deserve.
The outgoing Biden administration is vowing to give the incoming Trump administration what it did not receive in 2021, a peaceful transition of power.
I assured him that I'd direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition.
The U.S. State Department and Pentagon echoed President Joe Biden, saying the transition is vital to the country's security.
That's why it's so important for us to conduct a smooth, efficient,
calm, orderly, and professional transition to the next commander-in-chief.
Biden administration officials say the transition is also important for foreign relations, as world leaders brace for the return of President-elect Donald Trump.
There is one president at a time, and Joe Biden is the president.
The State Department says President Biden will continue to pursue ceasefire deals in the Middle East. Trump has urged quick ends to the wars in Gaza and Ukraine.
I am convinced that quick end of the war, it will be a loss.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he communicated that to Trump during his congratulatory call.
We would like to fair ending of the war.
Russian President Vladimir Putin also weighed in on Trump's vow to quickly end the war.
This deserves attention, at the very least.
Trump has indicated he would also stop U.S. support for Ukraine. That's why President Biden wants to send out the remaining assistance, about $6 billion, before Inauguration Day.
We're going to surge and get that out there.
In Washington, I'm Jesse.
Well, in the wake of the election, Democrats are examining why Michigan went for Donald Trump. Here's Jack Springate with a look at what they're finding.
As the Harris campaign tried to appeal to independents and disgruntled Republicans, they might have missed out on solidifying their own base, according to political consultant Greg Bowens.
What was happening with Arab Americans, for example? What was happening with Black male African Americans who are part of the base? And a sort of last-minute appeal to try and shore up that base probably looks like it came too little too late.
Trump regained control of Michigan by more than 80,000 votes, even though Democrat Alyssa Slotkin won a close race for U.S. Senate. Bowens believes that says a lot about how Michigan voters felt about Harris.
You know, we have to be honest and say that the situation unfolding in Gaza and the Middle East really did have an impact on this election. Having the mayor of Hamtramck come out, and the mayor of Dearborn come out, and even Rashida Tlaib, her refusal to endorse Vice President Harris has an impact too. All these things add up.
Attack ads targeting social issues Democrats would typically rally around, including LGBTQ rights, seemed effective in rattling Harris's base, according to Bowens.
I think there was a fear that was, that was elevated through these ads about some of these social issues that don't necessarily reflect the reality of what's going on.
He says abortion rights didn't sway voters in Michigan like it might have in other parts of the country as well.
I think it was hard for voters to see that threat as a real threat, because of the successes that had occurred here in Michigan with protecting abortion rights for women.
Well, coming up next on the rundown, Election Day did not quite go as smoothly as it could have. Several states saw bomb threats called into polling places, including here in Michigan. But first, our own Tim Skubic will be here to give us his take on the latest election news. Stay with us, the Capitol Rundown. We'll be right back. Welcome back. While Tuesday marked the end of the election season, it's just the beginning of some major changes. The Rundown's Jorma Duran spoke with our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic to find out what it all means.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic, to help us out. Tim, everyone has their own opinions as to why Donald Trump beat VP Kamala Harris for the presidency, but I'm curious why you think he beat her.
Jorma, this one is really simple. 2 words. He overperformed, she underperformed. The number that struck me as just almost incredible is that Michigan has 83 counties, and count them, 74 voted for Donald Trump, leaving 9 counties behind who voted for Ms. Harris. Ingham County was one of those. Wayne County, Oakland County, Leelanau up north, and Marquette. Grand Rapids, the Kent County area, Kalamazoo, and Genesee County. That was pretty much it for her. Not a strong showing. So she basically didn't generate enough interest in her campaign. And he just found more people that liked him.
Well, Donald Trump definitely hammered down on immigration and inflation, although immigration isn't what it once was a year ago or 2 years ago, and inflation, we're sort of beating it here. So how come maybe the VP Harris select team didn't really counter those arguments?
Well, I think part of the problem was she spent too much time telling voters what everybody knew, that a lot of people don't like Donald Trump, and then she prosecuted that case rather than saying, look it, my opponent is going to do this, but here's what I'm going to do. Remember, she was introducing herself to the electorate and had precious little time to do that. And so if you're always talking about the other guy, the voters at home are saying, well, yeah, okay, I understand that, but what are you going to do? And obviously, they never got that message together.
Tim, the Michigan House is no longer in Democrat control, and that obviously is a big deal for the GOP to try and stop what they call is Governor Whitmer's agenda. So I'm curious, what bill or movement will likely not happen because of this development?
Well, very good question. There are talk in some Democratic circles that the newly elected, soon-to-be Speaker of the House, Matt Hall, has one agenda, which is not only to stop the governor's agenda, but to pass his own. But he's going to need the governor and the Democratic Senate to pass whatever the Republicans like. So at some point, if there is not going to be legislative gridlock in the new year, and some Democrats actually think that'll be the case, there's going to have to be a meeting of the minds and a coming together for the governor and Mr. Hall to sit down and look each other in the eye and say, let's do something together for the good of the people. That kind of meeting has not occurred. In fact, it's rather an ominous sign that the conversations between this governor and then current minority leader, Republican leader Hall, have been pretty much non-existent and not much substance there. And so if Mr. Hall's agenda is just to stop stuff, he can do that in the House. There's no question. If Mr. Hall, however, has an agenda of stuff that he wants to do, then he's going to have to cooperate and vice versa. And the jury is still out on whether that cooperation will begin to take hold.
Jorma, Tim, thank you. President-elect Trump says the White House should have more power over the Federal Reserve, but Chairman Jerome Powell says not so fast. Washington correspondent Trevor Shirley is in D.C. with more.
The Fed has long maintained independence from the White House. That's to avoid political meddling by an elected president. But President-elect Trump says he should have greater say over the Fed's monetary policy. Mr. Trump appointed Powell to the position in 2017, and as president was often at odds with the chair, angered the White House couldn't impose more influence on the Fed. On the campaign trail this cycle, the president-elect mused about firing Powell, or even bringing the Fed under direct control of the executive branch. When asked whether he would step down or expected Mr. Trump to fire him, Powell had this to say.
Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No. Do you believe that the president has the power to fire or demote you, and has the Fed determined the legality of a president demoting at will any of the other governors with leadership positions?
Not permitted under the law.
Chairman Powell's term ends in 2026, which means President-elect Trump will then be able to appoint a new chairman of the Federal Reserve. Reporting in Washington, I'm Trevor Shirley.
Most election officials are saying Tuesday went smoothly, but there are some exceptions. Coming up, we'll tell you about bomb threats that targeted certain voting areas and what officials are saying. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A mostly smooth election day nationwide was marred in multiple battleground states Tuesday by a series of bomb threats, along with fake claims of wrongdoing by President-elect Trump. The bomb threats in parts of Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania turned out to be hoaxes, but forced evacuations and some polling places to extend hours. Threats were reported throughout the day at polling locations in 3 metro Atlanta counties, all with large numbers of Democratic voters. By evening, threats were made to voting locations in Pennsylvania, forcing evacuations. Bomb threats were also reported at 3 voting locations in Navajo County, Arizona, according to the Secretary of State's office there. And there were threats made against polling places here in Michigan.
We are aware of non-credible bomb threats that targeted some polling locations in Washtenaw, Wayne, Genesee, and Saginaw counties. The FBI has issued statements officially confirming that those were tied to Russia. Last night, after the polls closed, doctored videos circulated online with false allegations of widespread voter fraud, and the incoming president himself, wrongly claimed there was significant law enforcement presence in Detroit and Philadelphia. Those false claims were easily debunked.
Overall, Secretary Benson says more than 5.5 million Michiganders voted in this election. If you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we've got just the thing for you. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just 1 email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen right now. This will take you to the sign up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletter. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown. We will see you all again right here next week.